Hi, everyone. Thanks for watching this video. I'm just going to start with kind of introducing myself, and then we will do a rotation of others on this call talking about their experiences living in Baltimore with kids. So I'm Ethel Weld. I am a ID doc and clinical pharmacology person. And I've lived in Baltimore actually for 14 years. So I've really doubled down on Baltimore. And I came here for residency in combined internal medicine and pediatrics, came to Hopkins for my adult ID fellowship after working for 2 years as a hospitalist in a step-down unit across town at University of Maryland. And I had one of my children, who's now 8, as an attending hospitalist, and therefore with pretty good maternity leave of 3 months. And then I had the second of my children as a fellow, and he's now 5. And unlike other superheroes on this call, I only have 2 children. But I basically, in the time that I've lived in Baltimore, I've lived in 8 different neighborhoods. So I can speak to many neighborhoods and their advantages and disadvantages with having kids and living in places without having kids. So the first place I lived was in Evergreen, which is this tiny little kind of tucked away neighborhood, a little bit north of Cold Spring Avenue, a little bit to the east of Roland Park. And it's got really cute little bungalow houses that are kind of a little more affordable and viable and walkable to a bit of civilization up there, and is in the Roland Park School District, which is one of the Baltimore City public school districts that I would recommend considering. And then I lived in Fed Hill, actually in a weird terrarium-like treehouse place that was odd, and I can talk about that on another call. That will be a discussion. And I lived there by myself as a single person. Then I lived there with my husband after we got married, and then we moved out the second it became the most dangerous place on earth, when my first son was 4 months old and learned how to roll over, because it was just like platforms and brass salvage and precipices and like not an excellent place for child to be. And then we moved to Charles Village, which is a great community. It's probably within like a 12-minute drive to the hospital. It's got a lot of mechanisms in place for young families, just for kind of mutual support. It's a bit more urban, and yet, you can walk to the farmer's market. There's really beautiful park here. You're just right next to the Hopkins undergraduate campus. And if you want to live a carless life, you can, because there's a shuttle that takes you from there to the downtown Hopkins Hospital campus every day. That's free. I have been in a world when both of our cars died where we had to be on the shuttle with car seats, and that's a whole different world that I could chronicle. But over a lot of systems in place to make that neighborhood very friendly to young families. We were renting, so all the steps up until this point, we were just renting. When you move to, where I lived right before I came here was San Francisco, Chicago, Taipei. There's really a favorable reverse sticker shock that occurs when you move to Baltimore. It's much more affordable. The rents we were paying were around $1,100 for 2 and 3 bedrooms. And then when we were thinking about buying a house, we decided to look at Mount Washington, which is in the north of town. Our kids are going to be in the Mount Washington Elementary School of the Baltimore City Public School District. Mount Washington is still part of Baltimore City, but it's a little leafier. We have deer eating our hostas instead of rats eating our garbage, so that it's like just a transition. But we have basically, we have kind of many trees, greenness, really nice bike trails, and arboretum next to us. And we've been happy. The kids have had a chance to get a neighborhood posse of kids who live around us, which we've never had that before. And my youngest is going to be starting kindergarten in whatever shape or form that takes. And I'm really hoping he doesn't have the teacher he had over the past few months, which would be me. But we'll see what happens with that. But he, before that, was in the most adorable nursery school. We had such a good experience with it. I could talk it up to the stars, and my older son went all the way through there too. And the name of that nursery school is called Bolton Hill Nursery School. It's in the Bolton Hill neighborhood, which is like a 10-minute drive south for us. It's mostly staffed by Maryland Institute College of Art grads. So there's these incredibly creative, loving teachers who are like career teachers who've been there for 20 years. And who all of whom have bachelor's degrees. So it's kind of unusual for a nursery school. There's many amazing traditions. They take them to the symphony. They have a Halloween parade. They have a May pageant. They have a Thanksgiving pageant. I love a pageant. So it's been a really, really nurturing and loving community. And I would say that like over 50% of our friend base are from those parents that the first couple years who we were stuck together every weekend at birthday parties, and you really get to know each other. So still, we have a twice annual camping trip with the parents from that nursery school, and my kids stay in touch with people they've been together with since they were 2. So it feels very family-ish and really nice. So I can describe the commute from Mount Washington to Bolton Hill to Hopkins. All of that is possible within kind of a 25-minute span. So just in summary, I have found it really to be a wonderful place to raise kids. It's a diverse city. It's not frosty and chilly. It's authentic. It's accessible. The community mechanisms are really built up and in place. We're in a drum circle. We're in youth soccer. We're in a million different things where people are loving and inclusive. And I can't say enough good things about having kids here. So that's kind of where I'll end it. And I'll pass it on to Eileen Scully.
Well, thanks, Ethel. That's an amazing story to think about, all the places you were in Baltimore. I'm sort of the opposite. I've only been here for about 4 years. Not even quite yet. And I was in Boston before that for about 10 years. So I did experience the beauty of the reverse sticker shock on arrival to Baltimore. So I have a big family. I have 3 older stepsons who are, 2 of whom are college age, although one is just about to start, and then another one who's in high school. And they were students at McDonough, which is one of the private schools out in Baltimore County that people will absolutely rave about, and is basically like a mini college campus for part of their education here, and did all sorts of, they're all boys, and did lots of sports and things of that nature. I have 2 other kids, one of whom is 5.5 and one of whom just turned 3. And so they have thus far been at the daycare that is on the Johns Hopkins Medical Campus, the Bright Horizons daycare location. And I had huge trepidation when I moved here from Boston about that. I was in this like very homey kind of daycare situation, and like felt like those daycare providers had sort of taught me how to be a mom. And so felt like I was going to corporate daycare, and I have just been absolutely thrilled with Bright Horizons and the care they've given to both of my kids. And my daughter has Down syndrome, and that was one of the other reasons why, and she's the older one, why there was so much trepidation in moving, taking her out of her environment. And they have just loved her and helped her blossom in so many ways. And so I can speak, and the convenience of that, which is right on the main campus, just up the street. And it has provided me a different kind of connection. I don't camp with any of the parents, but I have been asked to give talks by two of them, and they were like, "Hi, you're Grace's mom. Like, you work in this area at Hopkins," because all of the people who use the daycare are affiliated with Hopkins in some way. So I've made more cross-disciplinary friends through them in the Hopkins community, which coming in as junior faculty, it's harder to meet people. You don't come in with a cohort. So that's been great. And then the other thing I'll just mention in case anybody watching this cares, there are good services here for kids with special needs. And Kennedy Krieger is like a center of excellence for lots of issues and development, including physical therapy, but also like cognitive and neurologic things. So that's been a wonderful resource. And on more than one occasion, Grace goes to work out at the gym on Thursdays in her PT session, and I can just walk over to my office, get her daycare, bring her down, and then bring her back, which has been incredibly convenient. So I live way out in Baltimore County, which is partially because there are lots of pockets out here where you can get plenty of space when you have a family that swells to the size of 7, depending on different times of the year. And we have foxes and deer, and we have had 2 birds' nests built on our house this year and 3 crops of birds. One of those birds' nests was in fact built in someone's leftover field hockey helmet that was hanging in the garage. So it was a surprise to everyone, and especially that there was an egg in it. But anyway, so it's beautiful natural country out here if you like horses or something like that, which I don't. I don't dislike them. I just don't actively like them. There's tons of opportunities like that. And I think there are opportunities to find the kind of life, whether you want that to be urban or semi-urban, and still have a reasonable commute and lots of connection to your friends and colleagues at work. Oh, I should pass it off. Sorry, I'm supposed to pass the ball. So the ball now arrives with Dr. Griffith.
Hi, I'm David Griffith. I did medical school in Baltimore, and then I left for residency and I came back to do an ID fellowship here in 2014. I did a combined internal medicine and pediatrics ID fellowship, which I finished in 2018. And now I'm stayed at Hopkins to do mostly HIV clinical work, both in pediatrics and adults. We had our first kid when I was a first-year fellow, and our second kid when I was a last-year fellow. And we lived in the Fells Point neighborhood, which is, for me, was about a 15-minute walk to the hospital. And that was really incredibly convenient, especially as a fellow when you're kind of every minute counts. I felt very safe walking on the streets that I walked to go to Fells Point, and never really felt like that was an issue. It was pretty convenient when we had kids as well. For both of our kids, until they were 2, we did nanny shares, which is we had one nanny and then another family joined, so the nanny would watch 2 kids. So it basically cut the cost of the nanny in half for us, which as fellows made doing the nanny share about the same as daycare. And made more sense for us from a convenience factor. What's nice about living in Fells Point, which is right next to another neighborhood called Canton, is there are a ton of young families. So we were with a bunch of different families along the way, and there's good social networking sites, like there's a Facebook group and a listserv where we found other families just through that kind of community listserv. And the farthest family was about a mile away, like a 5-10 minute drive. But then our last 2 families lived within 2 blocks of our house. So they would just walk their kid over to our house, or we'd walk our kid over to their house. And that was great. There's also, most of our nannies actually lived in our neighborhood as well. So they would walk or do a short drive, which it doesn't snow that much in Baltimore, but it was always nice that they could get to our house easily and didn't have any commuting issues. So just there are a lot of young people down there, and I think that made that really convenient and nice. When our kids turned 2, they both started at a Montessori school called the New Century School, which is right in Fells Point. It was 2 blocks from our house. So ultimately, I was able to walk my kid to school and then walk to work, and the whole round trip was less than 30 minutes, which is a great way to start your day. So for us, that worked really well. We loved the school. Basically, they started at 2. It's a preschool, but for us, we were there. they offer full day care. So it's basically a daycare, but it goes all the way up through 8th grade. It's very multicultural place. They teach Spanish and Mandarin, and our kids really have gotten a kick out of that and really thrived there. And so that was a very convenient and worthwhile school for us. Within this past year, we moved. We were renting an apartment. We were in the same apartment building for 5.5 years, so ultimately had a 3-bedroom in that apartment, which when we had a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old boy, couldn't really do it anymore. So we now live just north of the neighborhood of Charles Village that Ethel had talked about, in a kind of row home type house. But we have a small yard and it's very quiet. And I can walk to the Hopkins shuttle. It's about a 10-minute walk for me. So about once a week, instead of driving, I'll take the shuttle, which again is just a nice mental break when you don't have to drive. So I appreciate that. And my son will start in kindergarten at the local Baltimore City public school, which is the Roland Park Elementary School. So haven't done that yet, but we're gonna just try that local school and see how it goes. Looking forward to that. Most of our neighbors send their kids there, and I've heard really good things about it. And yeah, I think that Baltimore is a good place for kids. When we live downtown, there's the aquarium, the science center, Port Discovery, all places you can get memberships to, and they're just kind of like little children's museums where there's tons of places the kids can go and run and play and knock things over and touch and feel, and again, a lot of young families. So it's been really fun to have kids in Baltimore, and I look forward to seeing how they grow and what else we learn about the city. So I'll leave it there and turn it over to Andrew.
Thanks, David. For those of you who watched some of the other videos, you may remember that I'm a 4th-year infectious disease fellow here at Hopkins in the ABIM research pathway. My wife and I both came to Baltimore as internal medicine residents in 2015, and then doing the short tracker research pathway, I started fellowship in 2017. And David and I actually did that clinical year together. He was finishing fellowship and I was starting fellowship. And like David, we also had our son that year. So I was a 1st-year ID fellow. And I will say that Hopkins for trainees actually has a fairly generous paternity or paternal leave policy for, if you compare it to other institutions. You can get 8 weeks of leave, and then additional weeks if you take disability or vacation as well. So I didn't end up taking that whole time, but I did take 4 weeks off, and my wife, who was still a resident, took the full 8 weeks off. And when we first moved to Baltimore, we lived in the Mount Vernon neighborhood, which some of the other fellows on the other videos have talked a little bit about. But when we decided that we were going to stay for fellowship, we thought about purchasing a house and wanted to be a little closer to my wife's family, which lives in the DC suburbs in Montgomery County. So we moved out to Howard County, which is a little bit west of Baltimore City. And there are some other faculty in the ID division that live in Howard County as well. It's quite suburban. We have a 3-bedroom house with a nice backyard. And the commute into Baltimore in the morning really is pretty easy because we leave, before traffic really picks up. It's about a 30-minute drive into the hospital. Coming home, depending when you leave, it can be a little bit longer, more in the 45-minute range, just depending on how traffic is and when you leave. Our son goes to a daycare, or did before COVID-19, went to a daycare near our house. It's a private school that has basically 6 weeks through 8th grade, so kind of like a school that David's kids go to, and we loved it. He was with a little cohort of 6 other kids through 2 years, and they had the same teacher that kind of went along with them as they went around the daycare to different rooms, and we got to know some of the families there. It's pretty fun to go to these little 2-year-old birthday parties and watch kids run around and just see what they're good at and how they interact with each other. So we've really liked living here in Howard County. People talk about wildlife. We also have deer and foxes and stuff. And my only complaint is there's no like apex predators to take care of the deer because they eat our hosta and anything that they see basically. So moving here, I was not expecting to develop such an adversarial relationship with deer, but that's where we're at now. So yeah, it's been a really supportive division. You know, as I said, as you can see, other fellows have children during fellowship, and a lot of the faculty have kids. And so I think people have been very understanding about needing to have a balance between your family life and your work life. And when I was a first-year fellow and my wife was, on call, and I had to leave at 5 o'clock to get home and pick up our son from daycare, none of the attendings had any issue if I said, look, I have to get out of here by 5. They were totally fine with that. So people are very flexible and very understanding.
I'll just add to that because, so I came here as junior faculty. I did my training and early faculty time in Boston, and I got pregnant with my second child 1 month after arrival, and then had a lot of trepidation about how I was going to announce to these people who had just, taken me on that I was going to have a baby. And when I told Dave Thomas, who's a division chief, he was like, "Oh, that's so wonderful." And it was just like, I don't know what the perfect reaction is, except for that was the perfect reaction. And especially when you realize like there's laws about FMLA that don't cover you for a year and things like that, and none of those things matter. It is a supportive place, and I think that is a huge part of what makes this a really nice place to work and a nice division to work in.
Yeah, I would echo that. I remember Dave Thomas saying to me when I told him I had 2 boys who were that time 4 and 7, he got this like misty-eyed look in his eye, and he was like, "Oh, those are the days you just open up your back screen door, they run out, and then they come back in the evening." Like, that he was endorsing a very laissez-faire, helpful, but also just that he was participating in that nostalgia and kind of warm-hearted embrace of family life as the head of the division was very helpful. So does anyone else have anything else to pitch in? I will say that it's really embarrassing. I have a top 40 restaurant list that
I want it.
So I cultivated it as a resident here, and it was so hip, I can't even believe it, 12 years ago. Now it is just so stale, and we don't, either the places have closed or it's just like a completely different situation taking kids there. But yeah, I have made some amendments to it. I still curate it, so I'm happy to circulate it.
And is it annotated with kid friendly?
It is for what that's worth. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we think this is a place with a city with life, and where you can adapt, kind of having a family to the life and the work. So, thanks so much for watching. Feel free to reach out individually to any of us. And we hope you come here.